is Roy Mitchell. I've been a student of Alaska Native languages for 42 years, and for the last 35 of those years, I've been involved with teacher training, helping teachers of Alaska Native languages develop lesson plans, curriculum, and learn new teaching methods that help them teach directly in Alaska Native languages without English translation. I've been particularly excited to help start a language immersion school, Ayep Hunlit Nauvik, in Bethel in 1995. First, let me talk about the idea of a linguistic emergency. We say that Alaska Native languages are experiencing a linguistic emergency because the number of speakers has been in rapid decline for the last couple generations. We already have, depending on how you count it, 2 or 3 Alaska Native languages that are down to 0 speakers. We have another one that has only 1 speaker. We have 4 or 5 other languages that have fewer than 5 speakers each. Even the language with the most numbers of speakers, Central Yupik, which perhaps a generation ago had 10,000 speakers. We're not sure how many it has now, but what all of the Alaska Native language communities have lost is there no longer are villages where children's first language is an Alaska Native language. If this trend were to continue, that would mean that by the end of this century, there could be no speakers left of any Alaska Native language, unless we do something now. That's what makes it a linguistic emergency. Perhaps you are interested in what you can do to help promote the survival and continued use of your traditional Alaska Native language. There's a number of things that you can do. One of these is look around your community, find out who speaks your traditional language, and talk to them. Let them know you would like to hear more of the language. Perhaps you live in one of the many Alaska Native villages which nowadays has no fluent speakers left, but there will be people in your community that know parts of the language. So one of the first steps to bringing Alaska Native languages back to a position of being the normal language of everyday life throughout Alaska is to start using what we know. So if you know a few words, start using them with your neighbors, start using them with elders, start using them with your children. Ask the speakers, whether they're fluent speakers or partial speakers, ask them if they have more phrases they can share with you. That's a beginning. Another very important step is to get some assistance in setting up organized programs. Several different kinds of organized programs can be useful. You can set up community classes for young children, you can set up programs in the schools, you can set up programs for adults, you can set up programs for whole families, people of all ages. And there's assistance both in how to set these things up and in pursuing funding opportunities to get things going. But let me mention about funding, the important thing to do is to start. Don't wait for a grant. Start, do what you can, and look for a grant. Currently, my day job is as research analyst for the Alaska Native Language Preservation Advisory Council. The Alaska Native Language Preservation Advisory Council was created by the state legislature and signed into law by the governor in 2012, and it is tasked with researching and recommending to the governor and legislature specific steps that the state of Alaska can make to encourage and promote the survival of Alaska Native languages. For most of the last 100 to 130 years, policies here in Alaska by the territory and by the federal government and by the state of Alaska have been actively discouraging the use of Alaska Native languages. So it is now officially the policy of Alaska to encourage the use and survival of Alaska Native languages. The council, every January 1st of even numbered years, is tasked with producing a formal report to the governor and legislature, specifically outlining which steps the governor and legislature might take to support the continued existence of Alaska Native languages. In the most recent report, January 1st of 2018, the council called on the governor to declare that there is a state of a linguistic emergency and asked the governor to take some specific steps to make it clear that it is the policy of the state of Alaska to encourage, not discourage, the use of Alaska Native languages. We were very excited when this idea was picked up by Representative Ortez in Ketchikan, which he introduced into the Alaska House of Representatives, and after much debate, it passed unanimously there, also calling on the governor to implement the Alaska Native Language Preservation Council's recommendation. It went to the Senate, and after much debate, it passed there unanimously. So we were very excited when on September 23rd of 2018, the governor signed Administrative Order number 300, declaring that there is a linguistic emergency for Alaska Native languages and calling on the state to take particular steps in response to that. One of the governor's key points in his Administrative Order 300, declaring a linguistic emergency, is a directive to the Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development. Key in this is a directive from the governor to the Commissioner to promote the use of Alaska Native languages and opportunities to learn Alaska Native languages throughout Alaska's public schools and universities. This is something that the Alaska Native Language Preservation Advisory Council strongly supports. Not that the schools and universities can do it alone, but they're set up to teach young children, to teach adults, and we very much need every opportunity for people to be able to learn Alaska Native language, particularly in those areas where the community has that as a traditional language. The Commissioner of the Department of Education and Early Development is called on by the governor to produce a report by January 1st, 2019, detailing specifically how they're going to respond to all of the recommendations from the Alaska Native Language Preservation Advisory Council in its 2018 report. Another key point that the governor highlighted in his declaration is to encourage all state agencies to make more use of traditional Alaska Native place names, particularly in signage. We have signs on buildings, signs on roads, signs for parks, and often the name of the place on the sign is not only not the traditional Alaska Native name, but sometimes it's just something silly and made up. A good example in Anchorage, where I live, is what people commonly call Chester Creek. You might think it was named after Chester, but there was no Chester. It is a mispronunciation of the traditional Dena'ina name Chanchnu, or Grassy Creek, and the railroad workers back in 1915 simply pronounced Chanchnu as Chester. One of the exciting things locally in Anchorage, pushed by Forrest Dunbar, was a new municipal ordinance such that when new buildings, new parks, new centers are created in the municipality of Anchorage, the municipality must at least consider using traditional Alaska Native place names, and they've done so already. There's a new park that's now called Chanchnu Muldoon Park. So it's very exciting to see that back, that traditional name back in use. I hope we'll see it in greater use in Anchorage in the future. Another example, very recently, the traditional village on the north slope of Utqiagvik changed its official name back to Utqiagvik. It never had been officially named Barrow. That was the first postmaster's decision that he didn't know how to spell Utqiagvik, so he named the post office after Point Barrow, 15 miles away. So the people of Utqiagvik voted and reclaimed their traditional name. So this is something that we're hoping to see more of. I'm often reminded of the one time I visited Hawaii, which was in Hawaii, you can't even call a cab or give instructions to a cab unless you utter some Hawaiian, because almost all the street names are in fact in Hawaiian. So one of the things that we're hoping to see is people once again expecting, in a positive way, expecting to hear Alaska Native language spoken on a regular basis. There are a number of ways in which Indigenous communities can work to revitalize their languages, to give them new life, new meaning to new generations here in the 21st century. And whether they're in Alaska, whether they're in the Pacific Islands, whether they're in what in Alaska called the lower 48 states, indigenous people have languages with thousands of years of history in place, tied in with the land, the sea, and the sky. And unfortunately, in all of these areas, there's a number of federal and local programs that have severely discouraged the survival of indigenous languages over the last century. We do have a couple of proven ways to help bring traditional indigenous languages back. And two of the most powerful ones are if you're down to the point where you only have a small number of elders who speak the language, an organized so-called master apprentice program can be the most effective way to create a small group of new fluent speakers who then can teach others. Once you have a larger group of fluent speakers, the most powerful way to reinvigorate the language for everyone is then to start language immersion schools and create a whole new generation in which most of the children are fluent in the local native language.